Добрый день,
Good afternoon. I welcome Russian and foreign correspondents at the Russian Foreign Ministry Press Center on the Smolenskaya Square. And let us start with the schedule of Sergey Lavrov. We have already announced during the last briefing the following information, but let me recall that tomorrow, on March 5th, the Russian Diplomatic Academy holds the 11th ambassadorial roundtable. Over 100 ambassadors have been invited and representatives of international organizations. The topic is digital threats and information security. Sergey Lavrov will open the conference, presenting relevant Russian approaches to different aspects of international information security. It will be followed by a discussion and Q&A session involving accredited ambassadors to Moscow on a wide range of topics. On March 11th, Sergey Lavrov will participate in the first Ministerial Conference of the International Organization for the Russian Language, which will mark the launch of the practical operations of this new structure. I will recall that the initiative to create the organization came from President of Kazakhstan, Kassym Tokayev. It was supported by Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Russia, Belarus. On October 13th, 2023, Bishkek saw the signing of the relevant treaty. During the upcoming conference, Secretary General, his deputy will be elected and documents will be signed. The sides will share their views on the Russian language and its use and new areas of cooperation. We hope that the organization, along with other mechanisms in the CIS countries, will turn into a useful tool of promoting the Russian language in the whole world and establishing cultural and humanitarian cooperation. Let us now move over to the global agenda. The situation that is now unfolding in the Middle East cannot be named only or called a situation around Iran only. We're talking about aggression of the U.S. and Israel towards Iran. We see the escalation of the crisis at a large scale. It is with great concern that we are observing the developments. Minister of Foreign Affairs Sergey Lavrov has talked in detail and warned about it in advance, and everyone now sees it. We see an unprecedented escalation of tensions in the region. It is the consequence of an unprovoked attack of the U.S. and Israel against Iran. By acting irresponsibly, Washington and Tel Aviv did the following, and allow me the following expression, the following wording. It's not according to the international law, but it describes the reality very well. It's lawlessness. They're trampling the principles of international humanitarian law, inserting the region into the abyss of a chaos. The international community must assess these developments properly in an unbiased manner. Russia has decisively condemned this escapade of the U.S. and Israel against Iran, the shameless assassination of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and the supreme leadership of this country. Our principal stance has been published in the statements of the Russian Foreign Ministry at the UN Security Council and special sessions of the IAEA. It has been steadily communicated on all the levels, including the top one. We promote the immediate ceasefire, the cease of hostilities, and the settlement of the current issues on the basis of the UN Charter and the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, ensuring the security of all the states of the region. There's no doubt. It has been declared many times previously that the so-called Iranian threat has only been the pretext of a long thought through plan to depose the regime in Iran that the U.S. and Israel didn't like. And it's the member of the UN. And the resumed negotiation process that we see was just an attempt to conceal these plans. Is that something new? Not at all. For many years we have seen that the negotiation process has been used for this purpose exactly, as a plan to depose a regime or to conceal one's plans to militarize certain countries or to conceal one's plans to escalate a conflict. Washington does not hide its intentions, and they talk about it openly. They are trying to achieve the change of regime in Iran. The trigger for launching these dramatic events was the failure to organize a color revolution. The opponents of the Islamic Republic unsuccessfully tried to impose this on the Iranian society, the Iranian people that bear the burden of a long-time sanctions yoke. But this sanctions yoke emerged for a reason. It was authored and organized, orchestrated by those who wanted to change the regime in Iran. Previously, they used illegitimate sanctions, economic blockade, suffocating this country, all the means necessary at their disposal, but they did not succeed, and they moved over to the next scenario. You see what appeals there are now towards Iranians. They should capture the power and take the country. It's a violent interference into sovereign matters of states. It is cynical, it is inhumane to hear appeals toward Iranians, as the West says, the power into their own hands, when we see that the West is tearing these hands of Iranians away, apart. We see that legitimate authorities of Iran are controlling the situation. They do not allow any chaos, vacuum of power. But at the same time, this military campaign against Iran has very serious repercussions for the civilians and the regional infrastructure, regional and global economy. The air traffic has been disrupted. Different supply chains have been disrupted, and energy supplies, and we see the prices are now surging. We see that nuclear facilities have been affected by different strikes, which significantly impacts the global regime of non-proliferation and has serious radiological risks. We're talking about the risks not on paper, but on the ground. We see that a lot of thousands and thousands of foreigners have found themselves in a very dire situation. We're talking about tourists, children. We're also talking about Russian citizens that didn't have enough time to return to their homeland because of this escapade. We see that our friendly states that are friends of ours, are also affected by different strikes, and these strikes have injured different various civilians. We categorically call upon these countries, the U.S. and the Israel, to cease the fire, to stop the violence that leads to the growth in losses among civilians, be that in Iran, where as the result of this barbarian attack against the school in Minabi of the Kamazgan province, according to data as of today, 165 girls died, be it casualties, victims in any other country of the world. In this regard, we have never listed losses or distinguished between right and wrong losses. We have always demonstrated empathy and sympathy with all the civilians who have been or who had been affected by hostilities. We're deeply concerned by recent statements of the U.S. administration. They're saying that they want to continue the hostilities until some kind of American interests are met. Our colleagues at the embassy, different consulates general in Iran continue to be brave in carrying out their tasks amid a very difficult situation, amid the war. Bomb attacks are of special peril that are happening very close to our embassies and representatives. On March 2nd, the bombs were going off 500 meters from our embassies and representative offices. We want to ensure security of our facilities. Washington and Tel Aviv have been notified about their location. We are grateful to the authorities of Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Turkmenistan for providing an easy access of evacuation of our citizens from Iran to our country. A large group of women and children, family members of the Russian embassy, was evacuated at the beginning of March. Of course, we appeal to Russian citizens do not visit the Islamic Republic. If you are there already, try to leave the country as soon as possible. For those who is still there, please stay in contact, stay in touch with our diplomats. We are convinced that the crisis around Iran has no military solution. We urge to renounce any solutions of force, and please turn to diplomatic and political solutions and ensure legitimate interests of all the countries in the region. We are ready to continue to help find paths to peace for all countries in the region. You're all aware that the Russian Foreign Ministry, consulates general, permanent representative offices with international organizations, our embassies, see it as a priority to help Russian citizens abroad who find themselves in a dire situation. It has been exactly the case this time. During the first hour, the first minutes following the first strikes on Iran, coming from Tel Aviv and Washington, our embassies, instructed by the central office in Moscow, started informing our citizens on safe routes of evacuation. They informed the citizens on the air traffic, the resumption of flights, evacuation flights, the timetables. They also informed the citizens on the operations of airports, and each and every embassy of ours regularly publishes, as well as consulates general, the relevant information on all the accounts of social media in different messengers so that our citizens have access to this information. We understand how hard it is to ensure communication and access to information, so we do everything in our power to ensure everything is communicated to our citizens. I call upon all the citizens, tour agencies, all media outlets, please be very responsible as far as citing information, publishing news goes. And please refer to the information we are publishing on our digital resources. Pretty much every minute we obtain new information about Russian citizens that are now located or that are now in the countries affected by the conflict. Our embassies and consulates general are working 24/7 to inform our citizens on the coming air traffic. All the information is published on information resources of our embassies and diplomatic representative offices. I can tell you that the Russian Foreign Ministry accounts have now become the source of information for our diplomatic missions abroad. We try to make everything possible to notify our citizens of all the changes as far as the evacuation route from Iran through Turkmenistan to Russia goes. As of now, on the Iran-Turkmenistan border, there are 5 border checkpoints available for our citizens. Sarahsartik, Lutfabat, Gaudan, Bajgiran, Akaila, Inchiburun, Altinazir, Inchiburun. Of course, everything will be available in the transcript of this briefing. Another important point, we're talking about an organized evacuation. In this sense, the crossing of the border is only possible only following the submission of the data to the Embassy of Russia to Iran. The detailed instruction has been published on the Telegram channel of the Consular Department of the Russian Embassy in Turkmenistan, as well as on digital resources of the Russian Foreign Ministry. All the links can be found in the transcript of the briefing. I'd like to once again thank all the countries that have been providing assistance to our citizens so that the latter can easily leave the territory of the countries that are now affected by the conflict. These countries are providing our citizens with their help. They provide assistance. That is exactly what we call a genuine friendship. We don't just cherish that. We will never forget that help and assistance. I would like to especially thank the Turkmenistani side for this colossal help and the real friendly attitude towards Russian citizens. They are saying the same to us, and please, Turkmenistan, accept our deep appreciation. This is the genuine attitude that reflects and highlights the strategic partnership between Russia and Turkmenistan. I will continue to regularly thank all those who provide assistance to our citizens in returning to their homeland. I'd like to stress again that Russia always helps the citizens of those countries who ask for such assistance, and Russia has proved many times that it's ready to help. And remember the COVID pandemic, when our evacuation flights were ready to accept foreign citizens on the same basis, along with the Russian citizens, I mean. So I'd like to thank you very much. We'll never forget this help. We know that in these difficult times, in this historical era, everyone demonstrates their attitudes in a different way. There's only 1 second, and you should stick to it, and you should act accordingly. Some countries help those in need, others don't. Paris announced about the increase in its nuclear arsenals. Emmanuel Macron made a relevant statement. One should, of course, consider this in a wider context.
This step, hostile towards our country, and for certain reasons, he decided to remember this rhetoric. It fully aligns with acutely negative trends that have taken shape at present within the framework of activities that NATO countries are pursuing under anti-Russian slogans in the military nuclear sphere. Listen, we have things to talk about at the moment. We have to stop and think, and it would be logical for President of France, as nuclear country, as permanent member of the UN Security Council, to ask a question or even to announce a call considering the situation in the Middle East. Being a witness of the attacks, just to call to stop doing that, to tell about the risks that may arise, and maybe the permanent representative office of France at the IAEA could stick to the only correct position to draw the attention to how they manipulated the issue of Iran nuclear program in order to not to make the world a safer place, but to resolve the momentary issues, to resolve their own problems, to use their eloquency at the international organizations, and to draw the attention to the issue of nuclear blackmailing that is very popular in the recent days. But at the same time, we know the different thing. Macron stated different things, and we took note of that. For some reasons, he decided to focus on his rhetoric abilities on different issues, and previously, in line with the approach of the France, Britain also was embarked on the expansion of its national nuclear arsenal while reducing its transparency. And in accordance with US-British agreements, London will receive, in addition to its existing maritime component, airborne nuclear weapons, delivery systems, and access with the US consent to American nuclear air bombs newly deployed on British territory. This will further increase the number of warheads that this country will be able to employ in a potential conflict. At the same time, the traditional policy of NATO countries in this sphere precludes disclosure of the quantitative parameters of US nuclear weapons deployed in Europe. Russia has to take into account that, in addition to the United Kingdom, the undisclosed quantity of such armaments is deployed in 4 other European NATO countries and Turkey, from where they are capable of promptly striking a wide array of critical important targets on the territory of the Russian Federation. The schemes and capabilities of the so-called joint nuclear missions of North Atlantic Alliance countries continue to be actively developed against the backdrop of unrelenting calls from a number of European capitals to undertake more radical measures, including the forward deployment of US nuclear weapons facilities in close proximity to Russian borders. Beyond strengthening national capability in the military nuclear sphere, the UK and France are working with their allies on the formation of a certain own, or, as they say, independent or autonomous capability for pan-European nuclear deterrence. Initial hypocritical attempts to present this as some kind of an alternative to the American nuclear umbrella have quickly given way to acknowledgments of the obvious fact that what is at issue is an expansion of the European nuclear component within NATO, supplementing the already existing alliance practice of nuclear sharing missions, carried out with reliance on American nuclear weapons. Thus, a substantial strengthening and expansion of the overall nuclear potential is taking place, which in the event of a direct military conflict with Russia can be employed in a coordinated manner against our country, not only with respect to the relevant European segment, but in its entire totality, including the US arsenal. In furtherance of these objectives, cross-cutting coordination on nuclear policy matters is being established within the European camp of NATO countries, including the open transition by the United Kingdom and France to joint planning for the employment of nuclear weapons and the coordinated conduct of such operations. London's participation in this bilateral format ensures the alignment of British-French interaction with the activities of NATO's nuclear planning group, which is conducted with the increasing contribution of the UK, but without the direct involvement of France. A fact that Paris has not failed to emphasize for many years, highlighting the complete autonomy of its nuclear potential. These efforts are being aligned with arrangements concluded by France with an expanding circle of European NATO allies concerning the involvement of these non-nuclear countries in certain advanced, or as they say, enhanced, algorithms of French nuclear deterrence, which envisage the progressive deepening of such interaction and essentially largely replicate American schemes of extending nuclear deterrence. Against the backdrop of Germany and potentially other European NATO countries preparing to begin engaging their military personnel and conventional assets in exercises and other activities of French nuclear forces, Paris is also admitting the option of subsequently deploying elements of its nuclear potential on the territory of formerly non-nuclear allies. Among other things, the foregoing highlights an increase in the already initially high degree of coordination and interaction among NATO countries on matters of adopting and ensuring the implementation of potential decisions regarding the employment of nuclear weapons against the common advisory. From the standpoint of the security interests, the Russian Federation, the fact that our country is traditionally viewed by North Atlantic Alliance as such an adversary is of fundamental significance. This is not only concealed, but is emphasized in every possible way. And this is precisely what announces French leadership. The ongoing measures to not disclose the actual scope of measures is the concept to join the system of control of nuclear weapons. As a consequence, the uncontrollably expanding overall NATO capabilities of the military nuclear spheres require increasing attention and the most thorough consideration in our own military development and planning in a world without the INF Treaty, the START Treaty, and other international agreements whose regimes have been rejected by the United States with the full support of these actions by or of its allies. The potential algorithm of control of nuclear weapons that might be developed in future with Russia's participation, provided appropriate conditions are established for this purpose, will require taking into account the factor of the overall NATO nuclear potential. NPT review conference in April-May of this year will take place against the backdrop of actions by all three Western nuclear weapon states that are directly provoking a nuclear arms race. Two of them have already openly announced the expansion of their respective arsenals, while the third, having purposefully rid itself of START treaty limitations and having for years ignored the need to facilitate the entry into force of the CTBT, has indicated its readiness to immediately commence expansion of nuclear potential and resumption of full-scale nuclear testing at any moment upon the first order of the head of states. No less significant in the context of risk to the NPT regime is the fact that the United Kingdom and France have become subjects of scandalous information that has come to light, according to which hotheads in the capitals of these countries are seriously considering the possibility of transferring nuclear weapons components to the clique ruling in Ukraine in a desperate attempt to maintain that country in the position of a viable geopolitical battering ram capable of inflicting, with comprehensive Western support, substantial damage to the security of the Russian Federation. What can I say? We have seen the reaction of the Western capitals, the statements of the officials, and the public statements. London and Paris responded in an unofficial manner. We deny the attempts made by London and Paris, and in this case, answering the question why, I would like to remind them their own argumentation that they have been using over the last years. Do you remember how many times they mentioned the phrase directing against our country? Let's remind them, but in the context of their own countries. The indicated suspects possess the opportunity, motive, and means to commit the designated international legal crime. Maybe I misquoted something, but I would like to specify this from UK and French diplomats. No, this is the argument that you have been using when, in your case, we're accusing our country without pretext. But in our case, we support it with your own argumentation. As for the intent, it directly follows from data obtained by Russian intelligence services. There are no doubts of it. These matters must be examined in the most serious manner during the forthcoming NPT review conference. Now we move on to the situation around Ukraine and the Ukrainian crisis. The Bandera neo-Nazi regime, under the guise of alleged military expediency, continues to violate international humanitarian law, commit terrorist attacks, and vent its rage over battlefield failures on peaceful Russian civilians. The armed forces of Ukraine once again deliberately struck purely civilian targets unrelated to the military-industrial complex, using drones and multiple launch rocket systems, residential buildings, medical and educational institutions, civilian and social facilities. Over the past week, I would like to highlight that we are speaking about the civilians. More than 150 people were injured, including one child. 22 people were killed. All these facts I am disclosing using the examples. In Lubimovka, as a result of shelling, on 23 of February, a resident was killed. Then the AFU struck, killing more people. And due to the use of drone and rifles, 5 people were killed and 15, including one child, were wounded. Belgorod region on February 24, in the area of the village of Chaika in Belgorod district, a driver of the agricultural enterprise Priskolia was killed due to the drone strike. On February 28, in Rozdestvenka, the munition hitting the territory of a private house caused the injuries of 2 people, and in agricultural complex in Belgorod district wounded 3 workers, and on March 2, a resident of the village of Golovchino was killed. Incidentally, Western journalists are also witnessing the Kiev regime's hunting of civilians in a Russian region. Such an experience got Ivor Bennett, Moscow correspondent for the British television channel Sky News, who traveled to Shebekino, Belgorod region. The film crew's vehicle was attacked by the launched kamikaze drone loaded with explosive. The munition miraculously failed to detonate upon impact. It is noteworthy that the journalist who repeatedly mentioned the phrase, and I quote, Russian aggression, during the filming of his report, then naively questioned why their vehicle became a target of a Ukrainian UAV. What happened was because they are hunting the journalists, and on Bankova they have this special list. Just have a look at Mirotvorets website, how many victims are enumerated there. This is exactly what they target. And this is not only about Russian journalists, it is affecting all journalists that are not serving Kiev regime. And even if they say nothing against Bankovaya, but not loyal enough, they're still hunting them. What happened, by his own admission, was a terrifying, vivid illustration of the daily dangers faced by local residents. Thank you for this, at least. This is true. This is really a terrifyingly vivid illustration of the daily dangers. I would add the word tragedy that is is being happening in front of our eyes for many years now. But for some reasons, British journalists in the first place were not noticing that. Zaporozhye region on February 23, a drone strike damaged the building of Dnepro-Rudninskaya district hospital, causing damage to the therapeutical department on March 1. On Vasilievka-Berdyansk highway in the area of Chernigovsky municipal district, 2 women were injured in a terrorist attack by the FU, one of them fatally. LPR on February 24, due to the detonation of the drone in the center of the city of Kremena, a man was killed and another civilian wounded. In Lesnaya Polyana on February 28, in Markovsky municipal district, volunteers were injured in a UAV attack. A man was killed. 2 volunteers, a man and a woman from Moscow region, were wounded. Bryansk region on February 24, a kamikaze drone damaged the school building in the village of Novaya Pogosh. On February 25, a drone strike destroyed a Felcher midwife station in the village of Kurkovichi. Yesterday, in Margarita Simonyan account, the materials, how at the nursing home in Iran, newborns being killed because they do not have the energy supply, water supply. Just have a look this report. This is one and the same way, just all the same. The negotiations, guys, the attacks against civilians, killing of civilians, we've been witnessing it during all these years. At the same day, a few attacked the village of Istopki in Klimovsky district, hurting 4 people. In Kursk region on February 27, as a result of an airplane-type drone attack on the building of the Karetny Dvor Auto Service Center, an employee was killed. He was only 25 years of age. 3 people were wounded. Krasnodar territory on March 2, the Ukrainian Nazis subjected the city of Novorossiysk to a massive drone attack. 3 people were injured, including 1 child. Just have a look at how many buildings were destroyed. The private houses, 61 buildings and 41 apartment buildings. Russian law enforcement agencies continue to take measures to bring Ukrainian soldiers and foreign mercenaries to criminal justice. Judgment in absentia in the form of 14 years imprisonment for participation in hostilities on the side of the Ukrainian armed forces were handed down to Argentine citizen Waldo Thomas Kuhn, Swedish citizen Lynn Theodor Per Albin Rovosari, and Croatian citizen Ivica Zurak. All of them have been placed on the international wanted list. Charges of committing a terrorist attack in Kursk region have been brought against soldier Alexander Levchenko and to Dmitry Kovtun. They took direct part in the armed blockade and holding of districts of Kursk region and were detained during combat operations.
The investigation of the criminal case against a militant of the AFU, Alexei Petrokov, has been concluded. He killed a prisoner of war, a Russian serviceman, on the grounds of ideological and political hate. In August 2025, he laid down his arms to the Russian armed forces. Petrokov will face the Supreme Court of the DPR. Zelensky, afraid of the reduction in the Western military and financial support, makes every effort to stay in the focus of attention. I don't know what medicines he takes, but some very heavy ones. He said that Kiev is ready to help the countries of the Middle East to combat the Iranian drones. According to him, the leaders of the Gulf monarchies can use their excellent relations with Russia to convince Moscow to introduce a month-long ceasefire. And I quote him directly. I quote Zelensky, "As soon as a ceasefire is reached, Kiev will deploy its best operators, interceptors of UAVs to the Middle East to defend the local civilians." That's what Zelensky said. Only one question arises. Is it more about being inadequate, crazy, or is it more about being satanically hypocritical? What civilians is he talking about? He's killing civilians. That's his main goal, to commit terrorist attacks and multiply bloody acts and operations. These are the experts that they are capturing on the streets of Ukraine, taking them from their own apartments and houses. The very people that they open fire at when these people refuse to be bussified. Even now, when the White House officials agreed that, conceded that they were holding these negotiations on the eve of their operation, Zelensky started to again manipulate this negotiation as though he would hope that someone would believe him. Kiev continues to beg for additional air defense systems. He cannot help anyone. That's bluff. His own desire to promote his interests amid the conflict in the Middle East. How good of a person he is. One of the main instigators of the conflict in Ukraine, Britain, supported this initiative of Zelensky. He's a fan of futures. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said that he intends to contribute to the combat experience of the AFEU and their use in the Middle East. London will help to deploy Ukrainian experts to the Middle East. Yeah, we know how great these experts are in Britain. They only are experts in one-way ticket deployment of experts. They are ready to engage their vessels into another geopolitical escapade. This shows the consumerist attitude of Britain towards Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are being used in the hostilities. Britain is providing the Kiev regime with munitions containing uranium. The Englishmen, you would say, are suffocating this post-Soviet republic till the last Ukrainian. And they apply their neo-colonial practices against the indigenous peoples. They subjugate them, and in London they openly declare their geopolitical plans to extrapolate the Ukrainian crisis on a wider territory beyond the British Isles, so that in the fire of the war they can ameliorate their worsening economic and financial situation. They're experts at that. On February 24th, British tabloids referring to some unidentified Western persons published information about the presence in Ukraine of British surgeons, physiotherapists, and nurses from the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom, I'm referring to you now. Don't you want to deploy your military and medical personnel from Ukraine to the Middle East? They're in need of these specialists. It is confirmed that this contingent will teach the Ukrainian specialists the swift evacuation of the injured people is not possible because of a drone threat. They want to rewrite the British regulations regulating their behavior on the battlefield. It will be changed. We have not seen any other information. We reaffirm that any foreign contingent will be seen as a legitimate target for the Russian Federation. The British ones will not be an exception. Zelensky himself, whose military defeat is just a matter of time, if you have any sense, has repeatedly noted unreasonably that he would not mind obtaining weapons of mass destruction. Well, that's exactly what Europe needs and he needs. He said, and I quote him, that he would gladly accept nuclear weapons from Britain. And our special services have reaffirmed that London and Paris work out on a possibility on transferring to Kiev of a Wunderwaffe, a special miracle weapon. And everyone understands why it's done, to help the Russian regime, the so-called regime, flounder. On March 2nd, Zelensky signed, and I'm of course talking about it ironically, it's terrible, he signed a law adopted by the Verkhovna Rada that allows for the coercive evacuation of minors from the territories affected by hostilities. Well, you can say that, well, that's kind of okay. You should evacuate children from the battlefield. They are crying, are being petulant, but we're talking about a different thing, and it's being done without their parents' consent. That's their favorite policies. I can imagine the scale of the talks and criticism when the world knows or learns about what the Kiev regime is doing with its children. The law has entered into force on March 4th, today. If the children's parents refuse to evacuate, the police have the rights to evacuate the children from the front region and to hand them over to the care facilities. And the parents can be reunited with their children within 6 months only in case if they live in a secure, safe territory. But who is to define whether a territory is safe and secure? Of course, the Zelensky's regime. The decision to evacuate people will be made by the regional and military administrations. Have you seen footages and pictures in which Ukrainian citizens of all nationalities are being bussified and brought to the front. It will not be mothers or wives who will try to defend their husbands. This will be the parents who will be trying to rescue their children from these black holes, from these buses, understanding that they will never see them again. The document that has been adopted does not change anything dramatically. It only gives a legal basis to the practice that has already been rooted in terms of this coercive evacuation of minors. It takes on different forms, shapes, and manifestations. They have different organizations that are engaged in this practice. Phoenix, the Phoenix organization, for example, a non-governmental organization. Ultimately, the destiny of thousands of evacuated children is unknown. What will happen to these children? We remember that back in 2022, Zelensky, in haste, simplified and legally put gave a green light to the evacuation of children without their parents' consent. Ukrainian children crossing the border with their family members vanished in European states, and Western representatives were talking about it themselves. They said that a huge number of minors crossed the border. Schools and social facilities record a certain number, but it has nothing to do with the reality. The Northern and Central Europe authorities report on that. It's a doing of mafia. It's an elite grouping that engages in human trafficking. Lolita Express airlines are operating, and people are using these airlines, understanding that to the right or to the left are little kids that are going to be exploited later on, and these children can also become subject to a propaganda campaign about a Russian regime that supposedly stole the Russian children. These children will be killed and presented as stolen children. That's nice food for their crazy minds. How about the laboratories that Pentagon is operating? What is happening in these laboratories? But they responded that you're liars. They said, you're liars. But Americans said that it was true themselves. When their legislators themselves said that the network of biolaboratories is huge, and it's working under the guise of the Ministry of Health of Ukraine, and these are Pentagon laboratories. Remember that a couple of years ago, Russia declared that Westerners were doing their utmost to manipulate and conduct experiments involving biomaterial of the Eastern Slavic populations. They're collecting this material, and well, they made a laughingstock out of us. But then it turned out that a huge number of military biolaboratories has been deployed on the territory of Ukraine, and it's been operated as a part of the Ukrainian Ministry of Health. But no, well, everyone stopped laughing at that. And the transplantology was legalized in this way. It was legalized by the Kiev regime. So it's especially cynical when we see the slanderous allegations of the Kiev regime about Russia capturing thousands or hundreds and thousands and 1.5 million of children, but then they changed the number again. Then they started talking about 20,000 children, but then they all could only collect 330 family names that of people that have nothing to do with this case. I would like to reiterate that there is no list containing the names of these children or their family members that we have been provided with, or anyone else has been provided with the name international organization, a recognized international organization. I'm not talking about the freak show within the European, the Council of Europe. I'm talking about international organizations that are recognized and reputable. They only exploit this topic the way they exploit the children themselves. It is evident all the accusations against Russia. It's an attempt of the Zelensky regime to divert the attention from their own crimes against Ukrainian children. Just remember the case about where the Zelenskaya's foundation transported kids to Turkey. These girls were subject to different acts of violence. They were told that they would go to a summer camp, but they came back pregnant. It's just the tip of the iceberg. Now, open sources declare that Ukrainian children become victims of human trafficking, sexual exploitation, and the representatives of the Kiev regime are complicit in these crimes. They use the children to make money, to propagandize their ill values. Of course, they don't give they're not interested in the destiny of their kids. The Bandera Kiev regime keeps up the tempo of the war. They're trying to whitewash the heroic past of their own history. The memorial plaque has been dismantled, devoted to pilot Krasnov, who defended Odessa from the Nazi troops. Then the Bandera troops demolished a statue. Kudra, at the instruction of his commander, stayed in this region and fought against Nazis. In 1942, he was captured by Gestapo and shot. These are the heroes that were native of the territories that are now under the control of the Kiev Nazi regime. The aforementioned facts and everything that we're going to talk about later on reaffirm the relevance of the tasks aimed at denazifying, demilitarizing of Ukraine. All these tasks will be certainly achieved. Now over to Moldova.
Brussels follows its already known way. On 26 February, the Parliament of Moldova adopted a declaration in support of Ukraine on occasion of 4th anniversary of the start of the special military operation. The document is maintained in a Russophobic vein and bounds with anti-Russian cliches regarding the actions of our country. Naturally, there is not a word about the crimes of Kiev regime, but it says about the accession of Moldova and Ukraine in this consequence to the EU is of strategic importance for the stability, security, and development of the region and Europe as a whole. End of quote. When they were writing this document, they were using the experience of Ukraine, and it is surprising that when the poorest countries, they used to be rich regions of the Soviet Union, They used to be countries that were providing themselves and others with all what is needed in terms of agricultural products. What had happened, what they made with this? And now these poorest countries of the region, one of them in an armed conflict, can strengthen the security of the old world. Nobody is speaking about this, but Moldova itself is being ironic. Perhaps only by refusing to join the European Union they can maintain the security of this continent. Against this backdrop, official Chisinau continues to attempt to cleanse Moldova of Russian cultural and humanitarian presence. The situation, the ecclesiastical sphere is taking on an alarming dynamic. We have already commented on the attempted seizure of a church, of Orthodox Church of Moldova in the village of Derenei, Kalorasha district. This story has developed further. On February 25, the country's Ministry of Culture did not rule out the possibility of transferring 800 churches of the Orthodox Church of Moldova, which have the status of historic monuments, to the state ownership on the basis of a November decision by the Chisinau Court of Appeals, November 2025. Moldovan experts do not exclude that this creates the prerequisites for the subsequent transfer of church property under the management of the Romanian Orthodox Church. The Ministry of Education of Moldova is developing a new concept of teaching Russian language and literature in the country. Experts express concerns that its adoption will lead to a reduction in the hours of study of the aforementioned disciplines in Moldovan schools and the general lowering of the status of the Russian language in the educational system. Given the anti-Russian policy of official Chisinau, there is no reason to doubt the validity of such forecasts. The ban on broadcasting Russian featuring documentary films on military historical themes remains in effect because they supposedly why they cannot show the famous military historical movies there. What is the reason? Because they supposedly promote war. And this is a serious argumentation. I'm not being ironic. The Moldovan authorities themselves have launched a campaign aimed at increasing the attractiveness of military service among young people. And I have a question. Do they broadcast Terminator? Do they promote bad ideas or the aliens when the features extraterrestrial came to visit the country? Does this go in vain of the policy of the authorities of Moldova? And our patriotic movies cannot be displayed there. It's a shame. But not only this, even a spit in the face of Moldovans, because their ancestors deserve, by their blood and sweat, by their lives, a different treatment. To achieve a different treatment to their children, they were protecting the territory that is being blasphemously ruined by Sandu and the regime. Everything looks bad, but well, we could think it this way, but all is happening against the militarization of the republic, the involvement of its military personnel in NATO exercises, the transformation of Moldova's territory into a logistical hub for supplying the Kiev regime, and all this under anti-Russian slogans and contrary to the neutral status enshrined in the constitution. Such a struggle, we put it in commas, against war propaganda. The example of Ukraine has shown what Russophobia in its extreme expression leads to. Moldovans clearly do not wish to follow this path. According to recent public opinion polls, more than half of respondents are convinced that the country is moving in the wrong direction, and more than a third are convinced that in the coming years Russia should become a key partner of the republic in the sphere of economy and security. Perhaps this will at least restrain Sandu from rash steps to please European sponsors who are leading Moldova down a very risky path. If not Sandu, then maybe others would advise her. We are concerned about this continuation of armed clashes on the Afghan-Pakistani border. In recent days, armed skirmishes involving aviation and heavy weaponry have been recorded along virtually the entire length of the border zone inhabited by Pashto tribes. The civilian population is suffering, including Afghan refugees from Pakistan and Iran. Once again, we call upon Kabul and Islamabad to refrain from military confrontation and to resolve these agreements through mutually respectful dialogue. Kosovo. On February 10 of this year, in the Serbian autonomous province of Kosovo and Metohija, the self-proclaimed local authorities in brackets detained and placed in a pre-trial detention facility a Russian citizen and 2 citizens of Belarus on suspicion of committing a criminal offense. What kind of offense they have committed? Maybe black transplantologists that were searching for something and did not succeed, or nationalists. Do you know what kind of crime was announced? Unauthorized crossing of a border checkpoint. So when children are being killed from the point of view of Western ideologies, this is a fight for democracy. But when the border is being crossed of a state that, according to international law, lies within the same place, this is illegal. The office of the Russian embassy in Serbia in Pristina secured access to the detained compatriot and is providing him with all necessary support. Additionally, the request of colleagues from Belarus, the office has requested permission for a personal meeting with the citizens held in the detention facility. So the resolution of the UN 1244 of the Russian Federation, according to this resolution, does not recognize the independence of Kosovo and has no official contacts with it, so cannot provide protection to the interests of Russian nationals who find themselves there, against whom hostile and unlawful actions may be undertaken. We draw attention to the fact that in 2022, the Kosovo so-called government tightened the so-called visa regime for our compatriots, abolishing the previously effective right of entry to the province for holders of multiple entry Schengen visas or resident permits in Schengen zone state. Taking into account the high risks, we once again strongly recommend the Russian citizens refrain from visiting Kosovo and when planning travels in the Balkan region, choose alternative routes. Now we move to OSCE. I am not afraid to call it an organization of security and cooperation in Europe on February 25. A French chairmanship and the Swiss OSCE chairmanship in office held a joint meeting of 2 governing bodies of the organization, the Forum and the Permanent Council, on February 25. It was 2 days before the aggression of the U.S. and Israel. They could have discussed a different thing, but they focused on a different thing. They began with an appeal by OSCE Secretary General Feridun Sinirlioglu to revive the forum by returning it to its origins, substantive consideration of military and political security issues. The French chairmanship supported this idea and pointed to the importance of de-escalating the working atmosphere within this body, but failed to keep its promise. The concept of the event was anti-Russian. Once again, I highlight before the strike of Washington and Tel Aviv against Tehran were some days. The invited speakers on on the treatment of prisoners of war to French professors and functionaries of a Ukrainian NGO designated as undesirable by the Prosecutor's General Office of Russia didn't hesitate to display their Russophobic sentiments. The guest from Kiev was particularly unrestrained, which is unsurprisingly. His organization is nominally called non-governmental, but is in fact financed by the government of Ukraine and a number of Western countries, engaging in fabricating spurious reports about crimes of the armed forces of the Russian Federation and thereby whitewashing the genuinely criminal acts of the armed forces of Ukraine and other armed formations of Ukraine. The Russian delegation made a statement distributing the thematic reports by Miroshnik and the materials by Maxim Grigoriev, chairman of the International Public Tribunal on Crimes of Ukrainian Neo-Nazis. The reaction of the Paris representative was predictable. In contravention of agreed procedure, the forum chairmanship attempted to deny the floor to the Russian delegation as well as our Belarusian colleagues under the false pretext of the need to economize the costs of translations, not to translate from Russian into other languages. They were deprived of the right to speak any official OSCE language except English. This contradicts the long established practice of Paris that was fighting for multilingualism in international organizations. We regard the outrageous behavior of the French chairmanship of the forum as a localized but highly illustrative confirmation that Paris's public signals and those allegedly sent through confidential channels about interests in dialogue are worthless. The detached position of the Swiss co-chairmanship is also regrettable, as its silence encouraged the French colleagues who are not our friends to follow the path initiated in autumn 2024 by the Danish delegation and which led the forum to a most serious procedural and political crisis. The meeting demonstrated that the French, like a number of their predecessors, EU and NATO countries mainly, in the chair, are not interested in restoring the forum's normal functioning in accordance with its mandate, which is what the OSCE Secretary General was calling for, and that the military political dimension will continue to deteriorate. We, in the circumstances, reserve the right to take further steps to counter violations of the OSCE rules of procedure and the undermining of the foundations of the forum's functioning. As for Paris, they are responsible for destruction of bilateral relations and undermine the trust in their ability to reach agreements, in their readiness to be a mediator in settlement of the Ukrainian crisis. France is developing the idea of Russian threat and is one of the prominent sponsors of the Kiev regime. I've been speaking about their operations and acts against different pretexts. There are different narratives of this country leadership and the idea to resume bilateral contacts against the backdrop of what is going on is weird. So their idea is to take any attempts to insert themselves by hook or by crook into the negotiation process on Ukraine. We will judge our former partners not by words but by deeds, and their deeds are exactly as I mentioned. We have good news too. On February 27, the humanitarian cargo was delivered in accordance with the instructions of the president to Madagascar to help overcoming the cyclone consequences. Mikhail Randrianirin, the Prime Minister, Minister of Defense, of Foreign Affairs, and high-ranking representatives of the country participated, as well as the Charge d'Affaires, Alexei Buryak, the head of Madagascar expressed gratitude for the prompt assistance, stated that it constitutes confirmation of the solid and fraternal relations between the two states and that the support provided demonstrates sincerely and mutually beneficial cooperation. The Russian side emphasized the provision of humanitarian assistance to Madagascar constitutes evidence of our readiness to respond promptly to emergency situations and provide aid to partners in cases of natural disasters. Briefly, we spoke about the war against memorials. It goes on around the whole Europe, the entire territory in Sør-Varanger in Norwegian municipality. The act of vandalism was committed. The memorial commemorating the liberation of settlement of Naden from Nazi German invaders by the Red Army. During the final stage of the Kirkenes operation and the harsh conditions in the north, Soviet servicemen forced the Naden-Nelve River, and whereupon, on October 27, 1944, the settlement itself was liberated from Nazi occupation. In honor of this event and the heroic feat of Red Army soldiers, a memorial was erected in 1994 on the initiative of the local community, bearing the names of 8 fallen Red Army soldiers. Those countries that so-called European elite used to call non-civilized, where we were, keeps the memory of all those who helped it in the liberation fights for sovereignty, when fighting against the external aggression. Wherever we go, we sometimes see that it's hard to go there. The climatic conditions are harsh, and the monuments are suffering from it, from corrosion, or they were difficult situation, emergency situation, but there are nations that maintain the condition of the memorials, and the West considers them as the third world, as Barrel used to say, jungles, and those people demonstrate their civilized attitude, and barbaric attitude is demonstrated, on the contrary, by the Western countries. We are outraged by the desecration of this monument and memory of the servicemen who gave their lives for the freedom and independence of Norway. Norwegian citizens and the government have always treated Soviet military burial sites and memorials with care and respect, providing the necessary maintenance and keep them in proper condition. We expect that a thorough investigation will be conducted into this criminal act, and the perpetrators will be identified and duly brought to justice. I remember very well when the officials of Norway were sharing with the Russian delegation their memories about their lives and their reflections on the contribution of the Red Army into the fate of their country. We would like to hope that all this is vivid, and this was not said to please the situation. Very often we speak about the colonialism and neo-colonialism, and one more issue to confirm it. In many our theses, we speak about the historic events, and now let's fill the gap.
Ethiopia, not.
We're talking about the victory of Ethiopia over Italian colonizers in the Battle of Adwa. It is considered as a landmark event. This victory has reaffirmed the strength of the spirit of the Ethiopian people and marked the launch of the liberation movement in Africa. The Russian movement was headed by Leontiev, a Cossack Leontiev, but the role of Russians was way greater. Mr. Leontiev delivered a letter from Ethiopia to the Nicholas II, and he accompanied the Ethiopian delegation that was sent to our country. On the complimentary basis, Russia gave Ethiopia 30,000 rifle, 40 cannons, and participated in the strategic planning of this country. Leontiev was born in the Kherson region. Now it's the Kirovograd region. There, his estate was located, and he invited his Ethiopian friends there so that he can be familiarized with his culture, language, traditions. Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov sent to his Ethiopian colleague Gideon Timotheotis on the occasion of this holiday a letter, the 130th anniversary since the victory over the Italian colonizers. Our country has always helped its partners to fight colonialism, its contemporary consequences. That's why the Russian-African Partnership Forum has been established. In the second half of this year, a summit will be held. The world has changed since then, and the global south has gained strength. It's demonstrating a great pace of development in economy, technology, science, and I always emphasize the following. The West has always told them that they are deprived of the gene of freedom, but they have demonstrated this gene of freedom to a larger extent than those who found themselves slaves of their own passions and somebody else's will. One of the symbols in the striving towards the modern multipolar world based on the rule of international law, not the imposed collective rules by the West, was the BRICS bloc. The Ethiopia is a member of BRICS. Of course, they will counter this movement. The West will counter that, and we see that. But the movement of history cannot be changed. I'm ready to respond to your questions. Is the International Life magazine with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. I would like to congratulate you on the International Women's Day. Of course, I'll talk about it at the end of our briefing. Well, as for Belgrade, Serbia feels the pressure from Croatia, Albania, and the non-recognized Kosovo. Can you comment on this discussions? 1 year ago, Croatia, Albania, and Kosovo signed an agreement of cooperation in security. A comprehensive set of measures has been taken ever since to establish a sub-regional military bloc, and now we see a practical phase taking place. The main areas the main players of this union want to increase the interoperability of their troops, to procure armaments. We're talking about UAVs, air defense systems, anti-tank means, etc. They also intend to establish their own military industrial capabilities. Croatia invited Albania and Kosovo to participate in the industrial military sector of their country. We're talking about rifles, explosives. They are paying special attention to nefarious cyber threats, risks that can negatively affect the critical infrastructure, etc. At the same time, they militarize Kosovo and are trying to integrate this self-proclaimed region into the regional systems. It counteracts, runs counter to the UN General Assembly resolution. One should, of course, we're not just paying respects to the international law. We're talking about practical steps of this matter. Allow me to cite a very simple example to you. It's the same thing as having two lanes, opposing lanes on the road, but there is no fence in the middle, and you always go in a wrong direction. It is a violation of the traffic rules, right? And you might think that nothing is happening, but this would result in deaths and accidents. It's not just a line that divides two lanes on the road. It's not just that somebody painted this line on the road. It's an indication that any violation cannot be justified. So this resolution describes this situation and is used as a litmus paper to assess how far those have gone who decided to run an experiment on the Balkans and redraw the borders. The resolution reaffirms the unity and territorial integrity of Serbia with regards to Kosovo, and I think it's very relevant when it comes to your questions. Only international presence is allowed, no other military contingents. This situation is evident, and Belgrade is voicing concerns, understanding how hostile the situation is along its borders, but Western capitals ignore it and continue to influence Belgrade, and they refuse the right of Serbia to defend their vital interests. They're trying to label Serbia as a pariah state, retaliating them for trying to get an independence. Croatia is a member of the Dayton agreements about the peace in Bosnia-Herzegovina, bears a special responsibility in ensuring security in the Balkans in the post-conflict era. Its actions in increasing the tensions around Serbia run counter to the provisions of the aforementioned Dayton agreements, Dayton Accords. In 1B addendum of this, addendum 1B contains the measures of the sub-regional control of armaments. They are guarantors of the documents that took active part in the negotiations. We urge the West to cease increasing tensions between the Balkan states and to provoke them towards a arms race and to prevent the risks of a new war. We see what their experiments led to in the Middle East, and the world is now incised, indignated. If there are more questions, let us move on. Is Lenta Ru with us today? Good afternoon. My name is Sergey. Let me congratulate you on the upcoming International Women's Day, March 8th. We have a question regarding the developments in Iran that affected the post-Soviet space. You talked about it, but let me ask this question again. How would you assess your contacts with post-Soviet republics that have the same borders with Armenia, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan? When we talk about the return of Russian citizens from the Islamic Republic of Iran, I have a request to our male journalists. Please don't forget that I'm not the only woman here, so please, if you congratulate me, don't forget to congratulate all representatives of the fair half of the population. As far as your question goes, I've talked about it already. The Foreign Ministry of Russia takes all the necessary measures, makes all effort to return the Russian citizens from the Islamic Republic. Our missions in Ashgabat, Baku, Yerevan have published and are still publishing relevant information about the possibility to leave Iran through Azerbaijan, Iran, Turkmenistan on land, and on the process of crossing the border on land. We are in close contact with competent bodies of the aforementioned states. So to expedite this process, we talk, or I talk, namely, with diplomats on a regular basis, and the only thing that I hear from them is, or are genuine words of appreciation. And they characterize and the results of the contacts with the diplomats and representatives of the aforementioned competent bodies as very productive. The contacts that bear fruits. I think that we can all say that, oh, we can do that, right? Our cooperation can then be used in other situations. As of March 3rd, Azerbaijan hosted 253 civilians, used it as a transit country. 8 people used Turkmenistan as a transit country. This work is now being continued. I would like to ask you to please not focus on words like evacuation and rescuing citizens. Of course, all of these words are legally justified, but we use these words only when we talk about providing assistance to our citizens in returning home. It is important because people try to understand what these terms are all about, but I use these words to demonstrate how the process of returning our citizens to their homeland works. As far as the methodology and the status of the citizens goes, that's all different. The Russian side, let me reiterate it, and that's a pleasure of mine to say that, expresses its appreciation to all these countries that I have mentioned for providing help to Russian citizens who found themselves in a dire situation amid the escalation of tensions in the Middle East, and we highly appreciate the readiness of our good neighbors and friends to provide necessary help in organizing the return, the evacuation, and in logistics. Well, when we realize in what situation they have found themselves without anticipating it. Do we have Interfax with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Can you hear me? I'd like to second what was said before. Congratulations on the International Women's Day to you and to all the women present. You have already touched upon the situation in Iran already. What's the number of Russians now in the Middle East affected by the conflict? As far as providing assistance to our citizens goes, what's the number of tasks that our diplomats have to address? As far as the exact number of people goes, one can only talk about the data that has been recorded when our citizens turned to our consular departments. When a Russian citizen goes abroad, they can be registered in a consular department, so he provides information about themselves. He becomes part of this information space and receives information in case of emergency. He receives text messages containing information about different events that take place. So the citizen, let's say, engages in a bilateral process of exchanging information with our consular departments. When we talk about short-term visits, whether it's tourism or other types of visits, they focus on their free time, and they do not find it necessary to share these information with our representative offices. They just want to relax, have a nice holiday, and they don't see any necessity in sharing their information with our consular departments. But if an emergency happens, as a rule, you won't know in advance if something like this happens. So these tourists that are on their short-term visits there just open their window and see that a new reality is now taking place. And of course, in these cases, it's very useful to keep in touch with our consular departments, because in this case, they would get notifications about what's happening. But going back to your question, I would say the following. One would find it really hard to give exact numbers. According to our assessments, and I'd like to highlight that this just it's not an exact figure. About 50,000 Russian tourists are now in the region. From 5 to 8,000 Russian citizens don't have an opportunity to leave Asian African countries because the transit air traffic has been suspended using the Middle East transit airports. A cruise ship with 133 Russian citizens is now in the waters and cannot continue its movement. One question is how many people are there, and another question is how many people have requested assistance or help as far as evacuation goes and logistics. Currently, there is no ban from the Ministry of Economic Development to visit the conflict region, but we urge everyone to not plan any visits to these countries until the situation calms and everything is okay again. Especially if we're talking about the UAE, Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. Russian Foreign Ministry in coordination with the Russian Aviation Agency, airliners, and other ministries provide assistance to evacuation flights, ensuring the safety of passengers. On March 3rd, Russian foreign missions carried out 24 evacuation flights. We have our partners have also organized land routes. Azerbaijan, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Russian embassies work 24/7 to inform our citizens on the developments and on new air flights. We publish all the information on our foreign ministry's resources and on the resources of our foreign missions, and we also publish that on the pages, expert pages of our diplomats. So I recommend our citizens to please monitor our accounts in social media. We try to aggregate all the information that we receive to simplify the monitoring process. Some families are not yet united. They have to share information. I think it's very useful for tour agencies and other actors. Of course, one has to take into account all of this. You have to take preventive measures and not visit potentially dangerous areas. Please follow the instructions of local authorities. Go ahead to shelters if necessary, and be guided by recommendations of airliners. And personally, I would add to that the following. I would make the following statement. I'd like to turn a request to everyone who is listening to this. As far as taking photos and videos goes, some countries have a peculiar legislation. It may become a reason for detention, for an arrest, and for claims against our citizens coming from the authorities. So one has to take into account the peculiarities of the legal legislation. The countries of the region, primarily the United Arab Emirates, have certain regulations as far as taking photos and videos goes. Now, many people take photos and videos, but you have to understand what the internal legislation is about regarding these actions, so please do not complicate the situation even further.
It refers both to journalists and to normal citizens, to tourists. If that's all, we move on to Anadolu. Yes, we are here. Congratulations on the 8th of March. We had 2 questions. First, you responded in the first part, and the second on the negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. Do you have a date or the platforms for negotiations? You're aware of our concept. The negotiations are being commented upon, but not as an idea or just supposition, but when the negotiations are really taking place and the delegation composition is set, and the head of it is Medinsky, who is authorized to give information about the negotiations. As for the time and place of the potential next meeting, or we can identify it further, which round it will be. The information will be given later, and you are well aware that it will be given to the media, because Medinsky never forgets the journalists. Thank you. Do we have Ria with us? Yes, good afternoon. Congratulations on the upcoming 8th of March, and congratulations to the colleagues. We have 2 questions today. The reports have recently emerged indicating that the situation in the Middle East has had no impact on the delivery of Patriot missiles to Ukraine. How do you assess such an approach by Western countries under the current circumstances? As far as I know, the Kiev regime emissary and its Western sponsors have long been lobbying the authorities of the Persian Gulf state with a view to arranging the transfer to Kiev of their available air defense system and corresponding missiles, to no avail. Now, among the Gulf monarchies themselves, in light of recent events, a shortage of such systems has emerged. And Germany previously announced that Berlin had no reserves of Patriot systems available for provisions to Kiev. We do not know whether they do not have the reserves at all, or just are not ready to continue this type of negotiations with Zelensky. And there are no grounds to believe that the current international situation will significantly diminish the efforts of NATO countries, primarily European nations, aimed at perpetuating the conflict and further supplying the Kiev regime with arms and military equipment. Russia will, in any case, respond timely on all emerging threats. And the second question, how would you comment on the information that Yerevan requested the EU for the deployment of a rapid response team to the Republic to counter hybrid attacks? Thank you. Before I start answering your questions, one of the main distributor of this news was the radio affiliated to government and authorities in Armenia. There is an office of this editorial, and interestingly, it possesses the letter of Ararat Mirzayan from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Armenia. I think this is one and the first of hybrid threats. Among the hybrid threats, maybe they somehow robbed this information from the radio station. As for the essence of the question, the deployment of such a rapid response team, as you said, to the Republic, is a projection of the Moldovan scenario onto Armenia. Journalists from this publication know that last year a European contingent operated in Chisinau to assist the authorities in countering Russian disinformation. And we have witnessed their work in defending democracy firsthand. Inconvenient information resources and content were simply blocked by these specialists without providing any legal justifications. Democracy were suffering greatly, but nobody just looked at it. Apparently, to ensure freedom of speech desired by Brussels, the information space was purged of virtually everything related to Russia, despite the fact that it was the information needed by the citizens of the sovereign country, but they were deprived of it by the rapid response team. Active experience of other countries demonstrates profound involvement of EU experts during the pre-election period, as well as in the context of a potential constitutional referendum, is unlikely to strengthen Armenian sovereignty. Quite the contrary. We spoke with Ministry of Justice. We note the comment of the Armenian Ministry of Justice that it was not going against the sovereignty, and we also confirming our readiness to send the same group in bilateral contact with the Republic. CIS, we recall, also has the potential to do this, and Yerevan has always the opportunity to approach the Executive Committee of the Commonwealth, and they, I'm sure, would not negate this help. Sputnik. Sputnik is here. Correspondent from Radio Sputnik. Also would like to congratulate you on the upcoming 8th of March, as well as our colleagues. One question: can Moscow be a mediator to the conflict between U.S., Israel, and Iran, considering the contribution of our country in resolving Middle East conflicts? Russia is actively engaged in diplomatic activities. On the 2nd of March, the President of the Russian Federation held telephone contacts with the leaders of a number of Gulf countries, the UAE, Mohammed bin Zayed, the Emir of Qatar, Al Thani, the King of Bahrain, Al Khalifa, and the Crown Prince, as well as others, to speak about the actual situation. Minister Lavrov also spoke about this with his colleagues. I would like to enumerate on February 28th, telephone call with Iran, then Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia. On the 2nd of March, 3rd March, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Iran, Amman, and today these contacts will be continued, and we are going to inform you. As such, the fact of so many contacts is the evidence of active efforts of the Russian Federation to stabilize the situation in the region. If this mediation in some sort, we cannot say no. As for the mediatory efforts as such by our country to help a certain state, I invite you to read the reports of the presidential office after the telephone calls when he says that we never say no when receive the when they ask us to help. Xinhua, good afternoon. Correspondent of Xinhua Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Van E discussed with Sergey Lavrov recently the situation in Iran and said about the position of China of 3 points: stop hostilities, return to dialogue, and jointly fight unilateral actions. How do you assess the position of China? Moscow and China have always followed the position on Iran during all these years or decades. In the joint statement after the summit in May last year, they demonstrated that the two sides are ready to act together to help stabilize peace and stability in the Middle East. But unfortunately, the readiness to compromise is not seen, and we are witnessing the aggression in the Middle East that is threatening to destabilize the situation in general. Russia and China are maintaining cooperation in different bodies, including the UN, and demonstrated the similar positions during the emergency meeting of the UN Security Council on the 28th of February. The exchange of opinions is also conducted on the highest levels. The leaders of our countries recently spoke, and they condemned the aggression, the massive attacks of Washington and Israel against Iran, and called to stop the hostilities, underlined the necessity of political and diplomatic resolution of the conflict in Iran. I can assure you that the foreign agencies of the both countries continue to dialogue closely on the situation in the Middle East in accordance with the conditions and the instructions given by the leaders of China and Russia in the spirit of comprehensive partnership and strategic cooperation. Thank you. And I congratulate you on the upcoming 8th of March. Thank you. Media Corporation of China. I join the congratulations to all women and colleagues in today in China. The annual session of the National People's Congress and the Chinese People's Republic Political Consultative Conference starts about the state planning and the system of 5-year plans is the question, including the cooperation, global geopolitical structure, regional development, and what is the position of Russia during this, what is the assessment of Russia of this 15-year period? It is up to the citizens of China and the government of China, but we always highlight that the Chinese population, the citizens, shall give their assessment to such events and their future implementation, considering the level of confidence and the special relationships that has established with China. We have the opportunity to answer such questions that you ask, and do not consider this as something that would be perceived as interference into internal affairs. We know that such a rhetoric or such acts as interference are unacceptable for us. We treat each other with respect, and for this reason we can easily answer the questions about our internal agenda and our internal development. I would like to quote the President Putin, who said that Russia needs the flourishing and stable China, and China needs a strong and successful Russia. The development, bilateral development, is based on mutual respect and mutual understanding, consideration of interests to strengthen national economies, and prosperity of the population of the two countries. Russia is a strategic partner of China and welcomes the development of comprehensive development of the country. We are sure that the decision taken during the meeting will help improve the potential of the Chinese Republic and increase cooperation between the two countries in industrial sphere, in educational and agricultural spheres, in scientific, and of course we're interested in deepening cooperation in transport, energy, financial sphere, intensification of humanitarian linkages between our countries, and we wish our Chinese colleagues a successful celebration of the session of the Council of the CPPCC. Thank you very much. Also, congratulate you on the upcoming Ace of March. Reiter is here. We join the congratulations to the colleagues from our colleagues of the media. And the question is the following. You already answered the question partially when answering the question related to risks of attacks against Iran, and what about the depleted uranium that is located in Iran, and what are the radiological risks? What are your assessment? How high are those risks? Wonderful question. It is very urgent to ask the question, but I cannot give the detailed information because it has to do with the comprehensive guarantees between IAEA and Iran, and I cannot comment openly on it. But I can state that the non-provoked American-Israeli aggression against Iran that is accompanied by the attacks against energy infrastructure on the territory of a sovereign state created serious impediments to implement the verification functions in Iran. And of course, we expect that the authorities of IAEA will find the opportunities to respond to lawlessness on behalf of U.S. and Israel, and will give the unbiased assessment to the situation. You know, the credibility of IAEA is on the table, and those people who are acting on behalf of the Secretariat to prevent further escalation, the General Secretary of the United Nations also have to say something. The attempts to close their eyes and to diminish the real threat are unacceptable. Those are not dead ducks on the ponds, with all due respect to flora and fauna. Those are nuclear plants around which the nuclear bombs are being exploded, and there are fires, and it goes non-stop. I would like to draw your attention to Rosatom Alexei Likhachev's statement. He said clearly about the situation. He underlined that the nuclear facilities in any case should be the targets of hostilities. And the direct quote, this is not a play to convert them into the targets is inevitable, and this is suicidal, Likhachev said, General Director of Rosatom. Special attention is given to the situation to nuclear plant Bushehr, and there is a real threat to the nuclear station because there are bombs exploded in a few kilometers away from it, from the line of defense. And we would like to call clearly echoing the call of Likhachev to be responsible to those parties involved, and we would like to continue distribute this information in all channels available. This situation causes crimes if Kiev during many years had the permission to strike against the nuclear facilities, and the experts who were granted the task to control the safety of those plants could not identify the direction of the shelling. It means that what is not prohibited is permitted, and it means that this situation is applied to other conditions. All those threats need the comprehensive response.
It requires concrete steps of the whole international community. If we're talking about concrete steps, let's start with the assessment and a unbiased and objective assessment of what's happening. Just look at what is occurring now. In the Gulf, tankers floundered. Well, who should have suffered from that? These are the countries that have the shore in the Gulf. One day later, the fuel oil was brought with the waves to the shores of world's resorts that are not part of this region. That's my response to your question. Just one day has elapsed, and that's what is happening. This will not end. This process can be concluded only once the world community will act united and will say no to such actions. I've just talked about the fuel oil, and that's my responsible answer because our country faced such a challenge due to a catastrophe on the Black Sea shore, when our citizens and our competent bodies, volunteers and experts fought for the safety of the Anapa shore, and we know what it was like, but it was unintended event. But what we see today is something that is happening to the tourist zone and adjacent territories. Instantaneously, the fuel oil will become a part of this tourism cluster, let alone nuclear and radiological consequences. And one would address the repercussions for decades. Just remember Fukushima. Sorry for digressing and giving you too much context, but I think it was worth it. Thank you very much for your answer. Let us move on. Do we have Newsroo with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Congratulations on the coming holiday and all the female employees of the Russian Foreign Ministry. We have two questions today. Taking into account the strikes of the U.S. and Israel on Iran, the Iranian retaliatory strikes, as well as statements of the U.S. and namely France, Germany, and Great Britain on the containment, condemnment of escalation and the readiness for defense measures against Iranian missiles and drones without direct participation in offensives. What's the Russia's stance on the risks of engaging European countries in the conflict, and what's the potential consequences for Europeans and potential consequences for the global energy security and stability. It is an unprecedented, tragic development in the Middle East. It has demonstrated the inability of the European Union to play any significant role in international affairs. I'm not talking about a constructive role that can be played by them, an active role, any role for that matter in international affairs. It has demonstrated only its full its its role in the relations with Washington. The officials should have been at their desks because that's what they are supposed to do. They said they stand in solidarity with the Middle East, and they hold grudge now against what the responsible ones, but they were on the beaches and couldn't escape the situation. The European Union countries did not provide a unified answer to how to react to this crisis, how to settle it. We saw a reaction supporting what? Supporting the bombing of the school, killing of 165 girls. The photo of their tombs indignated those and surprised to the very core those who had seen everything. Instead of expressing sympathy, condolences to the families of the deceased, which everyone could do, regardless of their position, they just did what they did. They joined the collective unconscious. They presented a statement containing a traditional critical remarks against Iran. They did not even mention the US and Israel that initiated an unprovoked act of aggression against Iran. It's the modern interpretation of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Nuclear bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, not by the US, they were just dropped from the sky by whomever. The lack of unity does not exclude the possibility that separate members of this community will act on their own, independently defining their role of engagement in the conflict. Of course, we have also noted a flagrant cynicism of Ursula von der Leyen with regard to the assassination of Ayatollah Khamenei. He was a legitimate leader elected by the people of Iran. She said that the people of Iran have now acquired, and I quote her, a new hope for their future. She just justified the physical assassination of a legitimate leader of a sovereign state. We're talking about the annihilation of the supreme leadership and the civilians of this country. Who did she address these words to? To the burial procession that buried the children, that they acquired some kind of a hope, a new hope for their future. What about their old hope? Did they just bury their hope with the children that lay in the ground? It's terrible. One can compare it with what Nazis did during the World War II. Goebbels, Dr. Mengele, gas chambers, purses made of people's skin. It's pumping blood out of children's bodies. These are all similar things. When you see burial ceremonies of children, you start saying that the society has now acquired a new hope for the future. What? I remember reading ancient Greek myths In one of them, a creature was offered young ladies so that this monster receives these ladies, girls, but it's now all in the past, we thought. Now it's 165 girls we're talking about. Girls that were delivered to Minotaur, the mythical Minotaur. They understood that that was an absolute evil. Now, sacrifices are similar, but they are happening at a larger scale. And these Minotaurs are called differently, but not the way they should be called. How many innocent people, including children, would they have to assassinate to get that new hope that Ursula von der Leyen talked about? That's not a rhetorical question, as the number of losses is on the rise. As far as potential repercussions of this aggression, it has led to a serious disbalance of global energy markets. First and foremost, the markets of the European Union countries, they are themselves to blame in the degradation of their energy systems. They refused to import Russian hydrocarbons. If the conflict drags out, and no one knows for how long it will last, no one is talking about it within the US or Israel. Once they talk that all goals have been achieved, now they're talking that there is no deadline to this crisis. We're talking about a long-term development. One should expect a further escalation of the situation, taking into the account the deficit of energy resources and the combat of key consumers for the remaining resources. What the stance of the West in general and the EU will be, they will just procure the energy resources from those who don't have enough resources themselves, and they will do everything in their power, driven by the colonial mentality. They will do everything to dominate. Who will suffer? They're not interested in it. The global South will suffer. That has always been used by the West to for enrichment. And to follow up on the topic that you touched upon at the beginning of the briefing, let's talk about Sweden. The Minister of Defense, Paul Jansson, said about the readiness to consider the deployment of nuclear weapons on the Swedish territory in case of a war, as well as the confirmation of Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson on the preservation of the ban in the peaceful times. How would the Russian Foreign Ministry assess this shift in nuclear policy of Sweden following its accession to NATO, and what are the strategic consequences for strategic stability in Europe? We have recorded these statements and the statements that I talked about by France, Britain, and Germany, statements of Poland, and we have recorded and taken into account these statements, but it is now evident that these plans of Sweden, with the nuance that it can only be used in the case of war, does not contribute to the preservation of strategic stability in Europe, but also only undermines the foundations of an international control and non-proliferation regimes. And it is We saw, in the same context, the recent entry of the French nuclear aviation carrier Charles de Gaulle to the Malmö port. It is now seen as a normal kinda that the nuclear weapon is being deployed in the Swedish territory. The international law and obligations say that it should not be happening. These intentions totally are part of the continuing process of voluntary intention of Sweden to refuse from any national sovereignty. They're delegating their rights to make key foreign policy decisions. As far as the deployment of nuclear weapons in this country goes, this question will not be put on a national referendum in Sweden. They are very keen on commenting other countries' referenda, but they cannot do the same with their own referenda. Historically, European countries saw referenda as a priority. That was the foundation of the Western democracy. But it's funny what questions were put on a referendum. Just everyday issues that are not of significance, that did not impact anything. As far as nuclear weapon deployment on the territory of Sweden goes, it's another issue. We're not talking about Swedish scientists working on a nuclear weapon with the help of their Baltic allies. We're talking about the fact that this weapon could be deployed in Sweden, and the Swedish leadership won't have anything to do with it in terms of control and monitoring. I'm talking about the military leadership of Sweden that will not even know what's happening there. I'm not talking about the general public, journalists, thinkers, scientists, and other stakeholders. Well, you can forget all about it. They won't have any knowledge of it. And that's one of the most important issues for this country. If you remember, how they talked about Russian submarines in Stockholm. It created an effect of a panic. Now, deploying nuclear weapons on your territory without having any public or expert control over it, they don't even have the right to ask a question, what's happening to these weapons? You're just not the onlooker. You just turn into a victim. What's the term that they use in the West? What kind of damage? Collateral damage. That's what they call it. So you don't even ask your own population, are you ready for such policies, measures? Do you want that? Amid this nuclear discussion to unfoundedly intimidate the population of the country with this threat from the East, I don't know what the East is all about. Is it Russia? Is it even China? China will use the Arctic to attack. Well, the Swedish propaganda machine continues to vigorously generate openly fake anti-Russian narratives. For example, this fake story about a drone launched from the Russian Navy ship and targeting Charles de Gaulle ship. In the Middle East, Sweden has its own diplomatic representatives that can also become target of these strikes, but well, no, you can't report on that. Swedish military said that they intercepted and neutralized this Russian UAV, but they did not inform on its on the further developments, and they did not provide any evidence of its existence. When they were capturing Russian submarines in the fountains of Stockholm, it turned out that those were just buoys, not submarines. So they realized that you cannot talk about submarines, but a UAV can be a subject of manipulation. It is symptomatic that such news pieces that were planted have nothing to do with the reality, but they become a natural part of the Swedish political narrative. At the same time, real episodes of Ukrainian UAV attacks are being ignored. No one wants to recognize it. The Swedish political leadership refused to recognize, despite all the facts at hand, that the Kiev regime is directly complicit in the attack of the residence of the Russian Federation president in the Novgorod region in December 2025.
The Russophobic obsession and political short-sightedness of Swedish leadership, which has turned its country, because they have a dilemma between the happy vassal and sad slave, and into a hypercritical accomplice, and they turned into the second one. They turned into hypercritical accomplice of neo-Nazi regime in Kiev. This obsession are dismaying. The hypothetical realization of Stockholm's nuclear ambitions will inevitably entail corresponding adjustments to Russia's nuclear deterrence strategy, with all the attendant consequences for Sweden. And I remind you, because before, together with the whole world, we used to appeal to NPT, to other treaties about the nuclear technologies, development of nuclear technologies and their production. And today, what we see, thanks to those who are bringing democracy to the Middle East, they has shown us that there is no international law. That there is an international law, and there are some concerns with the plans of the neighbors to develop nuclear arms, and these are phobias or concerns can become the pretext for bombing the adjacent countries. Bold news, please. Yes. Here I also joined the congratulation on the coming holidays. I also congratulate you. It was confirmed that the Russians are being sanctioned if they open bank accounts in Russia. For example, the person who is receiving the sanctioned bank received this salary was accused. And what can Russia do to protect its compatriots in different countries? Of course, these norms violate the norms, and they are the evidence of neo-Nazism. When we see the application of these sanctions to all spheres in EU, and all the relationships with Russia, as they say, are the reasons for repressive measures. But even in this context, the Baltic countries are especially sophisticated because of their pro-Nazi steps. The authorities act in such a way that flagrantly violate the human rights. And I remind to Latvia that the citizens have the right to keep their money in all the banks that they wish. They choose the bank according to their convenience, and this was the invention of the West, to which Latvia joined when it has left the Soviet Union. And contrary to its own national interests and national identity, it ran to join the ranks of the European Union in order to give people the opportunity of free choice, to give them the opportunities and for the operators to grant the freedom and to give all the opportunities to freely evaluate the situations. And not even 30 years passed when they started to apply the worst limitations to those basics. Frankly speaking, I cannot remember such a situation before. Those who live in Latvia are compatriots considering their age, because we are speaking about old people, and in most cases they just do not know about the illegal application of sanctions against certain financial institutions, and the criminal cases that are initiated against the person who is using the sanctioned bank cannot be viewed differently, cannot be considered other than a violation of international norms. The civilized democratic state that is caring about its citizens shall not apply repressive measures, but help people and explain the situation, protecting their reserves. And in modern Latvia, we cannot speak about the freedoms and protection of rights. This is a repressive regime that suppresses all conceivable and inconceivable human rights and freedoms. And I remind you about the federal law of June 4, 2018, that the foreign banks do not have the right to provide the information about their clients and the operations they realize. And there is a federal law of the October 14, 2025 that stipulates that EU does not fall into the list of the countries with which we exchange financial information. Next, please. Odintsova Daria, Izvestia. Have today a number of questions to you. Trump believes that Cuba is the next target. The president also stated that overthrowing the government there could place him above Reagan, Carter, or Nixon. Does Russia views such statements as an element of political pressure, as the real threat to regional security? Do we see the Doctrine Monroe revival signals, and is Moscow ready to provide support to Cuba if the pressure from Washington strengthens? I would like to distribute the accents in your questions. I am not going to comment the race between the presidents died and those who died and those who live now, and we provide to Cuba assistance for many years. We have strong fraternal ties with it, and we were always advocating for the right to develop in accordance with their own paths of development identified by their citizens, to protect their national interests, considering the fact that Cuba has always demonstrated its respect to international community and have never been the aggressor, and it has never given the opportunities to doubt it. Our cooperation is multilateral and is based on political support from both countries. We always say that this cooperation is not the detriment of certain interests, but our task is in favor of our people. I would like also to remind you that during, or maybe during already almost 70 years, Cuba is living in the situation of financial blockade, not even the sanctions. Russia, during all this period, have been providing the necessary diplomatic support at different international platforms, including in countering illegal unilateral sanctions. Cuba today is facing unprecedented economic and pressure of force from Washington. Some time ago, a few years ago, just remember, just look in the internet, search in the browser, that the soldiers were deployed in the territory of Cuba, but not to capture the country. They were not servicemen, they were financial operators. There were a lot of flights. The presidential executive flight of Obama was sent to Cuba to develop the country. They signed a lot of agreements, and I remember the handshake in the air that failed. Just have a look when Obama grabbed Castro's hand and wanted to put it up to show that everything is okay and that Cuba was also conquered economically in a positive sense, as they used to think, but it all failed, and the Cuban leader overplayed him, and as it turned out, he was right, because what was there was a Trojan horse too, because it is impossible. We understand, we see the country as a whole, and we observe the situation from the side. It was during our times when hundreds of economic operators were brought there, financial officers, industrial specialists, investors, and they said that Cuba had to develop relationships with the U.S., and now they proclaim it a terrorist country, and all the quotes that you continued in your question. Russia, for many years, were providing support to Cuba, and we observe the situation in the Latin American and Caribbean region and the increase of the tensions. There is a security strategy of the United States of 2025. There are some provisions that we have commented upon, and you probably have seen that some accents are moved to Latin America. That has to do with Doctrine Monroe, amended by Trump, and this is a direct link to Roosevelt amendment of the doctrine of the 26th President of the United States, who proclaimed the right of Washington to interfere in the Latin American territory to stabilize the situation inside that or another state of Latin America economically. Of course, it was concerning for everyone, and we call upon the diplomatic resolution of conflicts, and we are sure that the language of sanctions is counterproductive. On our part, we do not accept the attempts to impede the development of Cuba in this complicated financial situation of blockade that has been lasting for more than 70 years. As for our further cooperation, including the provision of support to Cuba in its current complex economic situation, the particular steps were considered during the meeting between Minister of Foreign Affairs of Cuba and our leadership, and we will consider and do all necessary. Thank you. Голос Отечества. Yes. The team of Голос Отечества joins the congratulations on the 8th of March to you and your colleagues, Sheikh Oleg. And we have one question. The head of Pentagon, Pete Hegseth, stated that the United States is no longer a defender, but warriors trained to kill enemies. Maria Vladimirovna, how does the ministry consider this rhetoric, given that in the U.S. strategy, Russia is officially designated as a regional enemy? Do we consider this as a direct threat and preparation for escalation? I do remember perfectly that some children of today's leaders used to say that Biden is their enemy. Are they ready? How was what they said to kill enemies and to apply their skills? This wording is not what I invented. By the way, this is about the rhetoric. So the current U.S. Defense Ministry, it was renamed as War Department or Department of War, and I do not think that this is just a figure of speech. This is a reference to old times. This is a declaration of intention, and they were not concealing their intentions. Anyway, if we speak about the strategy of national defense system of the United States, I would advise you to refer to primary sources. In its latest version, it is Russia is characterized as a persistent but manageable threat to NATO's eastern members. There is no mention of any regional enemy. Once again, even though it is a rhetoric, but the fact is important. We have repeatedly noted the reduction of grade of rhetoric and the confrontational tone. And we will be guided by the concrete actions, not words. Посольская жизнь, please. Good afternoon, Maria Vladimirovna. Good afternoon, colleagues. I congratulate you on the upcoming 8th of March and all the women, ladies who are present here. How does Moscow assess reports that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has offered Iran missile systems and other military technologies? Is it considered that such actions could affect regional security, and how is this factored into Russia's foreign policy position in the Middle East? I have to specify this information because I haven't yet seen it, and will come back later with the answer. As for regional security, if we speak about the Middle East, is it what you're asking about, right? Our calls are very clear, and they move from one discourse to another, and we're not speaking about the de-escalation, we're speaking about the complete end of hostilities, and we call upon the beginning within global de-escalation, the beginning and transition to political and diplomatic means of the resolution of the conflict. But as for the first part of your question, I will specify this information later. Do we have Ross Media? Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I join the congratulations on the 8th of March. Thank you. And I'm Ushakova Alona, editor-in-chief And the question is the following. Against the backdrop of Iran's retaliatory strikes, which have already affected the territory of UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, with American and British forces, how does Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia assesses the risks of further expansion of the geography of the war? This is what we have forecasted. It was not easy to calculate because no one mentioned the operations or those declarations that have been made were providing information for this to happen. But we know how this begins and how the situation may develop, and we spoke about all of this. So we comment this not as a fact that we witnessed, but as a warning that we made before.
Let us add some information to the list of countries. We're talking about Oman, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Jordan. We're hearing reports about the Yemeni Houthi movement and Saralak to join the hostilities against Israel. In the context of this conflict, we consider also intensification of hostilities on the Lebanese-Israeli border. Just look at the number of countries that are not adjacent to the region directly, but have been directly affected by this conflict in terms of logistics and in other regards. It is evident that the geography of the armed confrontation following the aggression of the U.S. and Israel against Iran continues to spread to the whole Middle East. We see that there is indirect involvement of navigation, maritime navigation, shipping, transportation, and the failure of supply chains. It is not a surprise because we have multiple times warned about the risk of such a situation in our statements. And of course, the responsibility for this escalation is borne by Washington and Tel Aviv. If that is it, let us move on. Do we have author E with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Good afternoon. On behalf of our media outlets, we would like to congratulate you personally and all the female employees of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on the International Women's Day. Sergey Lavrov made a statement that in case Europe attacks Russia, Russia will retaliate with all the means at its disposal. Does the Foreign Ministry see any indications of practical preparations for such an attack, or is it just such a noise? It's just some kind of a noise for its internal audiences? One should first and foremost say that we see a shift of a paradigm within the European Union in the context of its intensive militarization, and we are witnessing a militarization or a turning of the EU into an aggressive aggressive stakeholder, unable to make deals at dead end. A confirmation to this is an unprecedented financial contributions to the military-industrial complex. They are contributing to the course of the strengthening of its eastern flank. They are preparing their transportation, stepping up their munitions production. The EU has instructed to construct by 2030 a European defensive union and to achieve the defensive capability that provides for the creation of a necessary potential for such actions. One should ask, do their populations understand what their leaders are engaged in? I don't think they do. To justify the increased military spending, the leaders of the European Union countries integrate narratives of an increased possibility of a large-scale conflict with Russia in the short term. What Russia says about this is being completely ignored, and it's not being communicated to European audiences. Russia has repeatedly underscored at all levels that it does not have plans like this, and moreover, it's not part of our foreign policy agenda. It was just made up by European leaders, but it's not being communicated to their audiences. I think they are now plotting something against us, a provocation. They're experts at this. We see confrontation coming from the European Union towards Russia. We treat this seriously, and we know how many times they provoked international conflicts and wars, world wars. It turns out that we are now on the eastern front of the bloc, not because we are attacking, because they have such plans. They will take into account this shift of the European Union when we are formulating our foreign policy and our war planning, including the program of modernization of all kinds of weapons and military equipment. Thank you very much. We have another question. This year, Russia chairs the CSTO. The banner of collective security, under the banner of collective security in the multipolar world, is Russia ready to use all the potential of the CSTO even harder as a response to the plans of the U.S. to strengthen its military presence in a couple of regions from the Middle East to Central Asia and to Southeast Asia? I think that you have followed our comments. Russian chairship will focus on the effective implementation of the main mission of the CSTO, the maintenance of peace and security in the region, and creating necessary conditions for the states to flourish. Further cooperation within the CSTO serves as one of the foreign policy priorities of the Russian Federation. It is valuable per se, and we're working on the basis of a consensus. And in the current year, we will take joint steps with our allies aimed at the protection of our common space from any external threats, wherever they're emanating from. And we will be basing our work on in accordance with the current international situation and the expertise and the experience we receive from modern military conflicts. Madam Zakharova, Greater Asia is now on air. The first question is, congratulations first on the International Women's Day. Together with China and a number of other countries, we promote the peaceful agenda, encouraging to solve conflicts by political and diplomatic means. What do you think? What does Russia have to do so that the world unites against the unfounded aggression to conclude or maybe just decrease the escalation? I think we have to film a documentary about this. We have to hope for multipolarity, a real fundamental development of various global centers on the basis of industrial investment potential and, of course, the preservation of international norms. The global South is not just a geographical meme. It's a lion's share in the global economy, and it's on the rise. We see that similar indicators in the US and Europe are decreasing, and I understand that it is painful to them. They're not accustomed to losing. We don't treat it like that, but I think it's a never-ending game that they're not accustomed to losing in. It's a competition, and they annihilate those who they play with. So one should realize that their share in the global economy is declining. Western countries are attempting to do something against it, to do everything in their power to maintain their privileged stance, privileged role, to impose their exclusive role in the world. The armed aggression against Iran has been a manifestation of this aggression, so they are undermining the international law that brings the world back to the era of colonial empires. This story is far from over, and I think that it'll further leads to their degradation. This construction of a new hegemony will fail. By doing what they're doing, they are just looking for new enemies. And we're talking about the world, the global majority. This desire of peoples to define their future, to untap their potential, will prevail over these attempts of the West to restore this intensified, extreme attitude towards everyone else. Thank you. Second question is on the International Women's Day. Last year we celebrated 25 years of the resolution Women, Peace and Security. Our Russian permanent representative, Vasily Nebenza, said that women affected by the conflict directly helped create sustainable ties between people in the post-conflict era. They help to recover all people, elderly people, women, children, people with disabilities. What's the role of women in resolving the conflicts, and should women be more active in diplomatic and peace-building efforts? I think, of course, we should encourage that. We believe that every man, every woman has their own destiny, has their own talents given by God. They have their own path. And one should, of course, not try to prevent people from untapping this potential, especially when it comes to overcoming conflicts. Historically, our country has been prioritizing the protection of women's rights. It doesn't matter what our country is called or what political system it has in place or who's the head. Our country has always been a trailblazer in terms of promoting women's rights at the UN. Special commission has been established within the UN and the General Assembly, the UN Commission on Peace Building, and other bodies since 2014. A profile since the approval adoption of the relevant resolution, it became a part of the UN Security Council agenda. In the last 25 years, a lot has been done. A lot of progress has been achieved. Women have become less vulnerable in armed conflicts. They now play more active role in peace-building efforts. Measures are being taken for that, but women continue to be one of the most vulnerable groups of population in armed conflicts. And the engagement of women into peace building and settlement negotiations allows to develop more trust-based relationships with local populations to prevent, investigate cases of violence against civilians, increases effectiveness of reintegration, etc. And of course the role of a father is large, is huge, but the role of a woman, of a mother, is paramount when it comes to a discussion of a post-conflict statehood. Because we're not only talking about what's written on the paper, we're talking about what is part of women's nature. Our country encourages the engagement of women into the post-conflict settlement, of course, taking into account their desire to do that. Currently, the peace-building efforts missions, 12 women police officers are serving, 6 in South Sudan, 2 in Cyprus, a couple of women in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and another one in Liberia, and another one is in Colombia. Within the Ministry of Defense, 4 female officers are serving. 1 in the UN mission in Cyprus, 1 in the Western Sahara, and 1 in the UN body that is responsible for the ceasefire in the Middle East. We attach significance to the training of female officers, especially at the UN Center within the Ministry of Internal Affairs in Domodedovo. We have organized courses for law enforcement bodies representatives where a lot of women take place in the activities. Moreover, at the Academy of the Russian Armed Forces in Minsk, training is taking place for women. The engagement of women into peace-building efforts should be defined by their professional qualities, not by some formal instructions or violent paradigms that we see sometimes are being imposed in the West. It should not turn into a race after notorious quotas or parodies that are being imposed by the countries of the West. In the domestic diplomacy, women have played a very significant role, but should I say that again? But you know that yourself, we have female ambassadors, female representatives with international organizations, deputy heads, directors of department, deputy directors of departments, heads of units, advisors. Experts in relevant areas in the Department of Linguistic Support, international law, country studies, humanitarian sector, and so on and so forth. We have very good examples of this. Sometimes, or very often, I would say, Madame Kollontai is mentioned as one of the most famous examples. Of course, she plays an important role in the history of domestic diplomacy, but one should not forget that our women worked as diplomats and engaged in discussions, in wars even before Madame Kollontai, and Catherine the Great was very successful in this endeavor, and Empress Elizabeth and Madame Dashkova did a lot in this domain. Of course, they did not have such a status at that time, but their role in international agenda was very considerable. So I'd like to studying earlier times. We can remember Princess Olga and her international endeavors. So let's not turn it into just a formal exercise. Take historical facts into account, certain measures and steps that were taken, and we have a lot of evidence in our history records. If we don't have any questions, I'd like to say a couple of words on the eve of the upcoming holiday, taking into account that that has an international nature. March 8th is a excellent day, wonderful day. First days of spring following the winter, and I think it's very important for the whole planet, the planet at large. Our country has its own traditions. This holiday, the International Women's Day, is filled with its own content when a woman reaffirms her rights for equal pay, for equal development of her professional abilities and skills, for a genuine, in the best sense of this word, equality, professional equality, and it is strengthened by her experience and education. But at the same time, this holiday is colored by flowers, smiles, perfume, by compliments and gifts, when the men reaffirm our women's right and say that they're always on our side and are always ready to help us. They respect our professional qualities and give us a chance to be women. Currently, we remember the challenges that our country has faced so far. I understand how great the role of women is in the history of our country, and a special thanks goes to women, to women's sisters, daughters, mothers, and wives of our servicemen that take part in the special military operation. Thank you very much for your patience. It's your bravery. It's your faith. Thank you very much for waiting for our heroes.
Thanks for creating special atmosphere of love and hope. Women are keepers of home, but also warriors at the front. The medicine workers, journalists, public workers, volunteers, and just indifferential people. They create our victory with their sensitive but strong hands. The professionalism and analytical thinking helps to uphold Russian interests on the international arena at the diplomatic platform, to counter disinformation and fake news that over the last years have converted into the hybrid mechanisms of the Western states. And in this case, I can't but remember the role of women diplomats, those who represent our country abroad, there at the diplomatic front. And they are the heads of diplomatic missions, specialists in their spheres, work daily to uphold the interests of the mother hand in the international affairs. Women give new life, add light and joy, create a friendly atmosphere. And without loved women, we cannot imagine the strong family. And this is the pretext of a strong state. And in this, on this occasion, that is coming just in a few days. On this occasion, I wish all women of our country and all women of the world, for those who this day is important, I wish you health, joy, and in this context, even a good mood. Let the 8th of March give you more strength and let your dreams come true. Congratulations. I wish you all love and happiness. Thank you very much. Once again, I congratulate you all on this day and wish you all the best. Goodbye.